The Fed admits that gold is replacing the dollar, folks. It's here. How's everybody doing? Hope you're well. Back with another dose of economic reality. My name is JJ. You're watching Bull Boom Bear Bust. Back with another Economic Edge report. And a topic we've been talking about here for years is the re-implementation of commodities and hard assets, including precious metals, into global trade. And we have the Brics nations out there leading the way, uh, getting away from the dollar, not all of a sudden, very slowly. And this is how things usually happen. It's usually slowly, slowly, slowly. Nobody really notices too much of a difference. And then at some point, it reaches a point where it happens all at once, right? You see a surge. And this is true in economic downturns, right? Things happen, they deteriorate slowly. Then all of a sudden, one day, the bottom drops out, right? Nobody knows exactly what's going to trigger it, when it's going to happen. If that were the case, then no one would ever be hurt by an economic downturn because everyone would know exactly when it was going to happen and they would position themselves. But because of the uncertainty, because you don't know, because of the impossibility of knowing the exact timing on these things, you always see people get hurt in times of economic transition or economic downturns. Let's go right over to Forbes here to catch this story here. The Fed quietly admits gold is replacing the dollar as collapse fear predicted to trigger a pretty big multi-trillion dollar ETF Bitcoin price flip. So we see what's going to happen with the transition and as the dollar loses value. Will more people pile into gold? Right now we see precious metals being accumulated by pretty much every central bank on the planet. It's a no-brainer. So if you are positioned well, you're going to do just fine with this upcoming economic transition. If you're going to be holding precious metals, I would encourage you to, don't change course. Keep stacking, as I always like to say at the end of the episode, because ultimately we're going to reach a point where it's going to be commodities / metals backed currency. Now that's a ways down the road. We have this digital currency freak show, just a digital currency nightmare that I think we're going to head to into first. But I don't think that's going to last very long because inflation is already so far out of control. A digital currency is not really going to change the game up enough to change the cost of living, and it's a cost of living crisis. So we're going to talk about that here more in just a few minutes. We're going to show you what's happening with some of the companies, how companies are taking advantage of inflation to basically just be greedy, corporate greed. That's part of the puzzle here. It's part of it's one of the many reasons why we're seeing the cost of living skyrocket. In addition to all the money creation and lack of production, there's other part of this here that we want to touch on in this episode. But first, over here we've got rents coming down, and 3 American cities are seeing some pretty big rental declines, and these are cities that saw big inflows of population, especially starting in 2020. Let's go ahead and bring it up here out of the U.S. Sun. Austin, Texas, down 9.3% year over year. San Antonio, Texas, down 8.2%. Also, Nashville, Tennessee, down 8.3% year over year. So some good news for people looking for a lower cost of living, lower housing costs. These are cities where rents are starting to come down, and I think they will continue to come down as Americans continue to get buried under more and more debt. And the more debt you have, the more payments you have to make outside of your housing costs, the less you're going to have left over for housing. So it's just a no-brainer eventually. And we said here last year that we're going to start seeing rents come down in 2024. It's happening. A lot of us wish rents were coming down more. But, at least they're coming down. It is a slight area of relief for, again, the population that's buried under so much debt. All right. So something else, though, that I want to touch on here is a recent announcement. And this goes back to the gold currency and the re-implementation of commodity-based currency. The Brics nations officially announced an independent payment system. So outside of the Swiss system that we use here in the U.S., Brics nations are going to have their own independent payment system. So a country like the US will not be able to sanction them and kick them out of the SWIFT system because they're going to have their own system. The question is, will at some point the US need to get into this other payment system because of most of the globe is under this new payment system and we're not in it? Maybe America is going to be the last one to the party. And maybe America is going to become the new third world country, right? Who knows what's going to happen from this? But if you just personally are positioned well, then you're going to be ahead of the curve, um, more than most people, anyways. And we've been keeping you on top of this for years. We're the only channel here that I know of, and I say here on YouTube, I'm the only channel here that warned everybody that the housing bubble was not going to go bust. Why? Because all the different changes that were made into the banking system. No one else even talks about these things. Nobody. And I watch a lot of different people to try to hear what they're talking about. And I'll purposely try to put information out there that no one else is talking about. Because if I'm just parroting what everybody else is saying, that doesn't do you any good. Right? So that's the reason why I do watch a lot of other channels. I do a lot of research. I dig up articles. I spent 90 minutes today just digging up news and articles to bring to all of you today. So I appreciate you, all your likes and subscribes. Thank you for keeping this channel alive. But what nobody's talking about is the changes that were implemented in 2020 that are still in place as of today. The banks don't have to have any money in reserves. They can still loan out money. Why isn't anybody talking about that? Why isn't anyone talking about the no down payment mortgages? Well, to be fair, a few people are, but I told you this was going to happen, right? So not just who's talking about it today. For years, I told you they're going to find new ways to keep the bubbles inflated, right? The powers that be, the central bank, they do not want deflation. They do not want prices to come down. Why do you think when inflation was less than 2%, they felt the urge to cut rates all the way to zero? That was a panic, right? 1.7% inflation number, because it was less than their 2% target, just slightly less, they had to cut rates to zero. It was an emergency. But since we've seen inflation well over 2%, in fact, over 4% in many cases, which is double their target, we haven't had the same emergency. They didn't raise rates enough to slow things down. Of course, we went up a lot on the Fed funds rate, but it wasn't enough. Even though they saw the outcome that it wasn't enough, that inflation wasn't slowing down very quickly, they still didn't raise rates higher. They should have. But that would have brought the whole consumer house of cards down because there's so much debt with the consumer right now. Look at 1.3, almost 1.4 trillion dollars in credit card debt, 1.7 something trillion in student loan debt. Consumers are almost to the max. They're almost to the edge of the financial cliff. Now, speaking of consumers loaded up on debt, let's go over to celebrity land for a minute here. Not that I love celebrities or that I worship them, anything like that, but I do look at the news, and sometimes the people that are famous, they'll get in the news, right? And this is someone on a reality show. You might have heard of her, Kim Zolciak. Well, something that I think you need to be aware of, if you don't already know, you can get your wages garnished from debt. And here's just a couple of the stories that were put out. Zolciak ordered to pay Target credit card debt, right? So unless you discharge the debt through bankruptcy or something like that, or negotiation, debt, what's it called? Debt, not forgiveness, but debt negotiation. You're going to have to pay this, and these companies, in this case Target, they can take you to court and get a judgment against you, and they can take the money out of your wages, right? So I don't think a lot of people realize that. People that are just running up endless amounts of credit card debt seem to not realize that. But it's interesting, there's certain types of debt that you can run up, and maybe you'll get lucky and it'll get discharged. Look at what's happening here with the student loan debt. We still have talks of discharging more student loan debt. So on one hand, you're irresponsible, you're running up debt, let's say on credit cards, you're going to get a judgment filed against you, like the celebrity Kim Zolciak. In another instance, you're running up debt, you're irresponsible, you took out a bunch of loans that you can't pay back, and you get it discharged. Doesn't seem fair, does it? Well, so I guess you have to be choosy about the type of debt that you take out. Also, we have medical debt, which will no longer appear on individuals' credit reports. So you could get away without paying medical debt. Now, hopefully they won't take you to court and garnish your wages, but as far as your credit score goes, That could be kind of a strategy. If there's something you're not going to pay, first, don't pay your student loans because it might get written off or might get discharged. Then don't pay your medical debt. The thing you probably should pay is your credit cards, or if you're going to file bankruptcy, don't pay any of it, of course. Not recommendation, but just telling you how the laws are currently in place right now and how things are happening. Where some people get rewarded, just like the banks. Some banks get propped up or bailed out. Other banks get taken over, or they're allowed to fail. Right. So it's not really a fair system. You just have to try to figure out, who and what is going to be rescued and who will not be rescued. But an important piece of the puzzle is corporate greed. And what do we see in 2020? We saw many small businesses close down, which allowed the big players, the big companies, the big stores, the big retailers to dominate even more and to price gouge even more. Look what's happening over at General Mills. This is the cereal, General Mills. General Mills just paid a $300 million dividend to investors, bought back 150 million in stock to enrich executives and investors, and pays its CEO 16 million a year. It makes 2.1 billion dollars a year in profit. However, even after all that, it's still raising its price on cereals 20%, or that's what it's went up um, since 2020, blaming inflation. So a lot of this is corporate greed, and we said this was going to happen. This gives companies a reason or an excuse to raise prices, and all they have to do is say, "Oh, yeah, remember 2020? Remember the supply chain shutdowns? I remember the cost of energy going up. Now we have to raise our prices." In the meantime, the bigwigs, the executives, the CEOs, the investors are raking it in, folks. You have to invest. In my opinion, you have to invest. I'm not sure how people are surviving now without investing. I'm not sure how I would get by without investing. So, hope all of you are stacking wisely, looking for investment opportunities, but also being cautious because there's a lot of risks out there right now. Got U.S. involved in proxy wars. Are we going to see nukes fly? Very likely. Nobody knows, but there could be some very drastic things unfolding here. So always be on the lookout for that. Always keep that in the back of your mind. Don't be fearful, but just be ready. Because if you're ready, there's no reason to be fearful. All right. What do you guys think about today's report? What do you think about the Fed announcement that the world is basically going to gold? They just came out and admitted it. What do you think about the General Mills raising their prices even after all these stock buybacks and huge bonuses and awards to their executives? What do you think about the falling rents in Austin, San Antonio, and Nashville? Some good news out there. Is it good? Is it bad? In between? You guys let me know. Thanks for watching, everybody. Keep stacking. Bye for now. Peace.